Thanks for joining us online today. Here at House of the Lord, we love to hear what God is doing in your life. So if you have a testimony that you would like to share with us, email us at amen@hotl.church. If this church has impacted you in any way and you would like to partner with us financially, go to our website at hotl.church, click on the right-hand corner to give, or text a dollar amount to 84321. Thanks again for joining us. Enjoy the message. Have a great day.
We are blessed to be with you. So, for those of you who don't know us, what Pastor Jeff just said, we've been married coming up to 41 years. We got 3 grown-up kids. Linda was a school teacher for 15 years in the middle of it. And we spend about a third of our energies invested overseas. We like to give an update about what's going on overseas before we teach the Word. Okay? So there's a couple pictures we're going to ask you to have put up so we can tell you about what's going on.
This is Anwar Fazal. He is from Lahore, Pakistan. Lahore has 20 million people in the city. It's huge. The only thing we have like it is New York City, and then we drop down to about 14 million in the United States. They have 5 or 6 cities that are over 20 million in Pakistan. So it's pretty hard to kind of fathom. This is in Karachi about 6.5 years ago. Anwar was part of the Secret Service for Pakistan and raised his hand in the Maryland Hickey Crusade that wanted to follow Jesus. And he started a church and started a TV station and just started doing the Christian stuff like Maryland Hickey was. That was his person that he followed. And what he did is he started a television station in the little public thing, and then it got bombed. So he's put it in a van and started moving it around so it couldn't get bombed. And then 2 guys from Portland, Oregon heard about what he was doing and put it on a satellite. So now Anwar is absolutely amazing. We were there 2 years ago now, 2 years ago in October. And we were there, we went after some meetings during the day, we went to the mall. And for lunch, and every third person came up to Anwar, interrupted him and the group that he was with, and either asked for a picture or asked for prayer. So he is like the rock star of rock stars. I don't know anybody in the United States I could walk around that every third person would interrupt us. I don't even know that kind of person, right? So he's pretty amazing. He has a church of 33,000 in the town of Lahore, and they're packed up, stacked. You want to put on the second picture? That's us at a Wednesday night service. 33,000 people. They're on the walls and in the alley and on the rooftops. He's going to go to the outside edge of Lahore and he's buying little plots of land in order to get a big plot of land where he can build a stadium with 100,000. But I think it's going to all be filled with first service, just because everybody knows it in Lahore.
Yes. So it's growing that fast. We like to make sure everyone understands here in the States that these are Muslims getting saved. About every 6 weeks, he has a gathering in some major city throughout the Middle East. Anywhere from 200,000 to 1 million Muslims show up, and over 80% of them raise their hands each time. And so that's what's going on right now.
So you do your little TV thing.
Al Jazeera is the Muslim television station around the world called Al Jazeera, and they were recently had a board of their pastors called imams on, and the imams were bemoaning the fact that Muslims are leaving and becoming Christian, about 17,000 per day right now. That's their numbers. Their numbers are 17,000. Our numbers are around 30,000 per day are becoming. So somewhere between 17,000 and 30,000 Muslims become Christian every day now. And so they usually the historic date is 622 when Muhammad is said to have started Islam. So it's been 1,400 years. More Muslims have received Jesus in the last 8 years than all 1,400 years preceding. That's how many Muslims are getting saved right now.
So we were born again back in the late 60s, early 70s, and we didn't know, we thought that was the time, but the church was like everywhere. But now, there's how many, the percentage of pastors retiring now that were born again in Jesus.
About 70% of all pastors in America were born again in a 4-year period. Jesus was 60 to 72.
And who knew? We didn't know it was just our time, right? Well, this is their time. And it's an amazing time. And to not know about it is pretty amazing. You know, you don't have to have blinders on because it's not on the news, right? But just know that it's happening. And if you get to touch it somehow, it's worth touching.
Yeah, because the news doesn't tell you about this. They'll tell you about 2 terrorists instead of the millions of Muslims who are receiving Jesus. So this is in Pakistan, other countries like Iran, that's where Jesus appears in dreams. Thousands of Muslims are seeing him in dreams and committing their lives because they can't preach in Iran, so he's doing it without us. You know, the other picture, right down on the platform, you can't quite see it, but it's off to the side. There's a guy laying there passed out. That's because he jumped on the stage with a gun to shoot Anwar. Anwar shouted, Jesus! The guy passed out. He was out there the full evening until all 1 million people left. Then he came to and received Jesus. That's what's going on. So, there's so many stories, you just can't even tell them what's going on there.
So Anwar, I jokingly say, he has Kool-Aid, you know, a cult, you know, and they all, at the end, you know, the fluke's right in, and they all drink their Kool-Aid and die. So that's where I'm getting the Kool-Aid thing. He has so much influence. My heart, he's an evangelist, and he drips love. He loves everyone in this country. He's at the mosque on Saturday night with the imam with the second largest mosque in the world, with him on Saturday night, and that imam then comes to his church and crusades on Sunday. And it's really hard to resist him. I'll tell Harold, okay, I'll talk to Anwar, and I'll make my boundary. I'm not going to melt. And he turns to me at this meeting, or at the other meeting, where we were, and he says, oh, Harold does a TV program for Anwar's television where it just reads through the Bible and talks about it, okay? So he's been hosting that for 7 years, so he's heard Harold teach. And Harold was preaching at this meeting, and he turns over and he says, Linda, I did not know that Harold was such a good preacher. And I smile at him, and then he goes, oh, I know why. It is because you are here with him that he's a good preacher.
Thank you. So this everything went for it up. I'm going to do some teaching. Got something on my heart I'd like to share with you. But we do always like to make the church in the States aware of what's going on over there. Because it is the biggest revival the world's ever seen. In China, right now, 29,000 per day are receiving Jesus. Africa, more than 20,000 per day. South America, more than 35,000 per day. There's more Christians in China today than in America. And they are zealots. It's absolutely amazing. It's like second string is about to enter the court. And it's changing the world. It's really blessed. So I got to the whiteboard when I get the teaching mode. And there's one of the things that I'm concerned about is Christianity in America, of course. Okay, now, Christianity in America has a major attack against it, and I want to spend this time with you talking about it. There is pressure coming from the entire world system to separate people from God, to distance our hearts and our minds from God, but it's strongest upon those who are in our higher educational system. Yeah. I'd like to explain that. There's been several studies, and I hear varying numbers, statistics, but there's been anywhere from 75% to 87% where are Bible-believing young people who go into a university, loving God, somewhere between 75 and 87% will come out the other end not believing the Bible has anything relevant to say and questioning whether God exists. Okay, something's wrong that happens in that 4-year period, and it really troubles me what's going on. It's actually, from my perspective, the greatest threat on Christianity in our country. It is taking the next generation and turning them away from God, and it influences all of us But I wish we were preparing our young people a little better, but everybody needs to be prepared. And so we spent quite a bit of time concerned about that also. We're concerned about the big issues. Where's church Christianity going? How is it being influenced? And this is one of the areas that are really on my heart. So I want to explain something with this whiteboard about the thought patterns of America and why we're experiencing something like this and how it can be stopped and our next generation can be trained. I put up a timeline here. So I'm going to put the year 0 at that end, the year 2000 up here where we are. So I need to make it a little off-center. So I'm going to put the year 1000 right there, and I'll put 1500 right here. Now, I want to use this timeline to divide this whiteboard in half. Above the white line, I would like to put how you and I ought to be thinking. Biblical Christianity. I'm coming from the perspective that, yes, the God who's revealed in this book is the real God. But down here, I'm going to put Western Christianity. Now, already that can be kind of offensive because I just said there's a difference between biblical Christianity and Western Christianity. That can make some people go, what are you saying? Well, because we get to see Christianity in a lot of different countries, you quickly learn that other Christians read the same book we read, but they're coming up with different understandings. And you wonder why. What is the filter that we're reading the Bible through? Well, we have a Western culture. And I wish we could separate our culture from true Christianity. But it's very difficult because we are in the culture. Well, there's one fundamental thought pattern that every Western person seems to have. And you and I, because we're Western people, we have this when we read the Bible. It's like a lens. We filter the Bible, we filter thoughts about God through this lens. So I want to explain that lens, and then by the time we get down to year 2000 here, 35 minutes from now, I want to, hopefully you can see how you and I, we're thinking differently than we ought to be thinking. So below the line, Western Christianity, Western civilization. When historians talk about the foundation of Western society, they usually go back before Jesus to the Greek and Roman empires. So about 500 years before Jesus, we had a guy named Alexander the Great who went throughout the Middle East and conquered everything. He believed he could only control people if he destroyed all literature, all statues, all remembrance of history. When he went through with his armies around the Middle East, Southern Europe, Northern Africa, he tried to wipe the slate clean, controlling everything and impose Greek culture. And historians call it the Hellenization of society. And they usually say that's the foundation of Western civilization, because it was such a turning point in history that it was cleansed. Now Greek culture was imposed. So, starting about 500 years before Jesus, I'll put a cross here to represent Jesus, the year 0 when he's on. But 500 years before, we've got this Greek Empire. Well, the Greek Empire comes, and then after it comes the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire conquered the Greeks, and when they conquered, the Romans didn't care what your culture was, didn't care what your literature was. They only wanted to control government. All roads lead to Rome. So historians often call the time when Jesus came into the world as the Greco-Roman world. Greek culture, Roman government, that's when Christianity is born. One little country, Israel, is in the center of the Roman Empire. Israel was the only country in all the Roman Empire that was allowed any autonomy. The Romans believed the Jews are so hard-headed we can't control them, so let's just allow them to have a little bit of autonomy, govern themselves, and this is how they thought, but they were still within the Roman Empire. So this is our history. Then Jesus dies, resurrects from the grave, and then coming out of Israel, so I kind of envision Israel up here where Jesus is. He dies, resurrects, goes to heaven. Then the early Christians come out of Israel, and they're now going to spread throughout the Roman Empire, throughout the Greco-Roman world. That's where you and I, our history comes from. Greco-Roman world, Christianity comes into it. Now, if we want to understand how we think today, you really have to analyze and go back into your history. The very foundation of Western thought is this Greek way of thinking, and the best way to describe it is to explain that there are two worlds. A spiritual world, so I put a rectangle with a square there, a rectangle and an S there, and another rectangle down here with an N in the natural world. Spiritual world and natural world. This is the very foundation of the Greek worldview. And it was laid out by these philosophers named Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Now, the world at that time, the Greek people worshipped many gods. But along comes these philosophers, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, and they challenge those questions. They challenge, you don't know if all those gods exist. And they came to conclude there's got to be one God. And historians call it the time when the Western world turned away from a belief in many gods to one God. Now, we're not talking about the Jews. The Jews are up here. The Jews merge into Christianity. We're talking down here. And now, because of these philosophers, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, they now start envisioning there's a spiritual world up there and a natural world down here. All of our thoughts are laid on that foundation. Because we are Western people, and Western includes everything birthed out of the Middle East, up into Europe, then it spreads to North, South America, and now wherever Western education has gone in the world, it starts here, but that's our foundation. Now, Christianity, it's persecuted heavily until about the year 300. Everything starts changing. In the year 313, Christianity is made legal. Before that date, it was illegal to be a Christian. 313, it's made legal. Now, it was such a radical shifting that in 75 years, everything changed in the Roman Empire. It was illegal. 75 years later, Christianity was the only religion that's legal. All other religions were illegal 75 years later. That was millions of people are now said to be Christian. Now, they did not understand Christianity like you and I do. They did not understand a personal commitment to Jesus Christ. In fact, there was a fellow here around the year 400 named Augustine. He was the most influential thinker of the time. And he was so influential primarily because of the time in which he lived. The Roman Empire is now embracing Christianity. The emperor is saying, we'll allow no other religion other than Christianity. But you had one theologian named Augustine who's at the critical time in history where what he says is most respected, so he's profoundly influencing all of Christianity. Catholics and Protestants both call him the father of Christianity. One of the two fathers, Thomas Aquinas, is the other one. Catholics today call him the father of Christianity. He was that influential. Now, the part that's important to us is he built his thinking on there's a spiritual world and a natural world. He took the same two rectangles, said there's a spiritual world and a natural world, but instead of calling the spiritual world spiritual, he called it heaven. Now, that makes sense to us. You and I, we tend to believe heaven is up there, and now we live down here in a natural world. That's the way we think. Now, I'm going to take a minute to leave this and jump up here, and I want to put a correct way of thinking instead of a wrong way of thinking. Up here, if you were going to start with the Bible at the foundation of your thoughts, instead of Augustine and these philosophers, you would start in Genesis 1:1. Genesis 1:1 says, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Okay? Most of you know that first verse of the Bible. In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. So if I draw a rectangle right here, that would represent creation. God has just created. But notice within creation are the heavens and the earth. God has created the heavens and the earth. Heaven is not up here in a separate world. No. In Genesis 1:1, God created the heavens and the earth. The heavens and the earth are all within this box. All within this rectangle. Now, you and I tend not to think that way. We tend to think heaven is up there. It's always existed, even before creation did. That heaven has been always up there. God's always been up there. And we have never read the Bible careful enough to say, wait a minute, it doesn't say that. It says God created the heavens and the earth. heavens are part of creation. Now, there are many Bible verses that teach us that. And those of you who are interested, we can look at a lot of those verses, but I'm just jumping ahead right now. Say, consider this creation. The word heavens is used in the Bible in different ways. One is the natural heavens. You go outside, look up the sky, that's heavens. The Bible talks about the natural heavens, but it also talks about a third heavens where God dwells, and a second heavens, which is the spiritual world between the natural and God's realm. In order to diagram that, if I can now change this rectangle, and you think this is a flat plane, let's call that the natural. Then if I could put another plane right behind it, and then a third plane right behind it. You could think of this third plane as the realm of God, the third heavens. God dwells in the third heavens. We know that because in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, Paul said, I was taken up into the third heaven, into the very throne room of God. So we've got, now I'm going to put an earth in this first flat natural world. There's an earth. Everything above the earth is the first heavens. Third heavens is the realm of God. And the second heavens is the spiritual world between the natural and the third heavens. This was the biblical worldview. This is what the ancient Hebrew people believed. When they read the Bible, they were reading the Bible through this lens. You and I tend to read it through this lens down here, which didn't come from the Bible. Now coming back up here to Hebrew, instead of seeing it as three flat planes, it's actually, we have to put it all within a box, because all of it is within creation. So now I'm trying to fill in the sides of this box. So now it looks like it's a cube. It's supposed to look like a cube, sort of. Within this cube is all of creation. God created the heavens and the earth. It came into existence at a point in time. This is the foundation of Hebraic biblical worldview, but Western people, including Western Christians, tend to think heaven's up there, it always existed, and down here is the natural realm. Now, you can see it and hear it when the way people talk about the Bible. Like when we say the Lord's Prayer, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. We tend to think, Our Father who art in heaven, he's up there. We say, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Most Christians, when they say that, are thinking the kingdom is over there, and it's supposed to come down here. Okay, that's not biblical. Jesus said, no, the kingdom is here. It's in your midst. It's within you. Okay? Yes, Jesus reigns, but when your heart is right with King Jesus, his kingdom flows through your heart right here. It's not accurate to think kingdom's way up there and coming down. No, the kingdom is wherever Jesus reigns. It's the same thing about where is God's presence. Western Christians tend to pray, God, please come down from heaven. God, rend the heavens and come down here. But that's not biblical. Up here with this worldview, God entered creation and fills creation. Jeremiah 23, it says God fills the heavens and the earth. So it's more accurate to think, God, he fills all of this. It's not up there in a different box. God entered creation, fills creation. The third heavens is here. The second heavens is here. And the first heavens, when you're standing outside, you can see it's everything that looks up. Now, when you make that change in your thoughts, it changes how you understand many Bible verses, and it changes how you believe for miracles. Now, Western people think down here. Heaven is a box above us, earth and the world, natural world's down here. Most of the world today still has this one up here at the top instead of what Americans have. Yeah, okay. You see, the spiritual world being right here, that's natural Chinese culture. Chinese culture believes this thing called qi, energy. It feels everything, that every little molecule is alive. India, influenced by Hinduism and Buddhism, they believe that everything is right here. The spiritual realm is surrounding us. First Nations people in our nation, they're much more aware of a spiritual dimension right here. People in Africa, they're much more aware of spiritual realm right here. Now, it's still the majority of the world thinks this way, about that is their foundation, but it just turns out Christians in the Western world have an unbiblical way of thinking. Yeah, actually the Christians who say they believe the Bible are actually building on something that's not from the Bible. Now, let me show you why this is so important. We come up to Augustine, and now he's calling this realm, the top one, that was always existing heaven, and the creation down here as the natural realm. Augustine is trying to teach people about Christianity, and he develops a concept that how to become a Christian is you must have faith in the things of God. You must believe that which is true about God who exists in the heavens. Now, Augustine, in thinking this through, he says, okay, you have to have faith in the things of God, but who can tell you about God? Well, at that time in history, he believes the church is what tells you about God. His definition of faith was to believe what the church teaches about God. That faith is to believe what the church teaches. That was the definition of faith for over 1,000 years. In Europe, throughout all the Middle Ages, people believe that I'm a Christian if I believe what the church teaches. Now, that sounds kind of foreign to us, but back then nobody could read. You need somebody, other than the very leaders at the top. Vast majority of people can't read. So it's not an unusual way to think, but at that time in history, we look back at it and think, those people think the only way to become a Christian is believe what the church teaches, where we today think you have to believe in Jesus Christ, the person. Now, I would propose to you that our way of understanding believing in Jesus Christ is the way to become a Christian, but back at that time in history, when people didn't have scriptures, they didn't have reading, it was a reasonable thing to say, believe what the church teaches and you'll be a Christian. Therefore, most of Europe understood that she was Christian. Over 95% of Europe claimed to be Christian throughout the Middle Ages. But their definition of Christian was, I believe what the church teaches. Now, all of that began to shift in the Protestant Reformation. Right around 1500, Martin Luther comes along and says that church in Rome, you shouldn't believe what they teach. And then they started shifting the people and saying you must believe what the Bible teaches instead of what the church teaches. There was a shift in thought that's part of our history. Now, the Protestant Reformation changes everything, but I want us now not to look at Christianity, look to what happened in the natural world. Here we are, there's still a belief in the spiritual world and the natural world. Spiritual world, heaven, and a natural world down here. Something that happened at the same time that the Protestant Reformation happened in the 1500s is the scientific revolution. The scientific revolution, there's usually 4 fathers of science who are mentioned. Copernicus, Galileo, Isaac Newton, and Francis Bacon. There were a lot of other scientists, but these 4 are considered the fathers. They fit right in this period after 1500. They were also building on this concept. Heaven up here, natural world down here. But they were scientists studying things. And they came to say, well, through science, we can understand the natural world. That science is the avenue through which we understand the natural world. But then up here with about heaven and God, they said, well, we must believe what the church teaches, and that's what they said is how we have faith. They separated science and faith and said faith is of this world and science is of the natural world. There was a redefinition of faith in the scientific revolution. This is where the foundation of Western education got settled. For 200 years, the world of faith is heaven, the natural world down here is science. This continues until around the year 1800. So I'll put about 1800 up here. Working up to 1800 was the Enlightenment. For 150 years, people throughout Europe are really struggling with the church. The church was kind of a mess. They had real, reasonable accusations about what Christianity was doing. And they were frustrated with it. a large percentage of Europe became deists instead of Christians. Deist is you believe that God started the world, but he's letting it run like a clock that's been wound up. That he's not involved with the world. A deist simply believes that God created the world, but he wound it up. Now it's running by itself. God's watching from a distance. And then in the end, he's going to come back and judge it, but the world's just running according to natural laws. France was the first. Almost France as a nation became deist. Still in America, historians argue about the founding of America. Were there more Christians or were there more deists? They still argue back and forth. They both will talk about God, but actually there were a few more deists in the founding of America than there were Christian people that we would define as Christian. Still believed in God. But it's the official stance of things like the Masonic Temple is deism. And a lot of Masons were thinking deism. Deism became the strong way of thinking, God, you're not involved in the world, you started it, you ended it. That works all the way up to 1800, and then along comes a guy named Immanuel Kant. Now, lots of you couldn't care less about some of these names, but in universities, these are very important names. Immanuel Kant comes along, and he takes the exact same spiritual world and natural world, but he changes something. He says, this realm of faith up here, the realm of faith is so far away, he called it, the spiritual world is transcendent. Meaning it is so beyond us, we cannot access that world. In fact, he broke the relationship between the natural and the spiritual. He says, yes, there's a heaven up there, but it's so far away, we don't know anything about it. And he pushed it out there, and this way of thinking was accepted by every university in Europe by 1850. Now, it didn't come to America until after World War I. But in 1850, all universities embraced, yes, God might be up there, but he's so far away we can't access him. He's way out there. And in fact, they did something at this point that broke what's taught in Romans chapter 1. Before this time, most Christians believed what Paul said in Romans 1, that all of creation is declaring that there is a God. All of creation, and it's evident that God exists, his eternal attributes, his eternal nature is being revealed to creation. People used to believe that throughout Europe. But when Immanuel Kant came along, this professor who was really respected, he says, heaven is so far away, nothing in the natural world can tell us what's up there. That went the opposite of what Paul was writing in Romans chapter 1. They were believing, creation proves that there is a creator. But on this day, they said, no, creation can't prove there's a creator, and everything changed. The definition of faith changed. Faith became the acceptance of things without evidence. The definition of faith is to believe something for which you have no evidence. So you still got the two worlds. This world down here in the natural is science. The world up here is the world of faith. And the definition of faith is to accept something without any evidence. That's the definition of faith that most of the secular world has today. Most of the intellectual world, people that have gone to university, come out the other end with the spiritual natural getting further and further away until finally you cut. And now the spiritual is totally detached and there's no evidence that God exists. There's nothing in the natural that can tell us anything. And then finally, faith is just a blind leap. That if you really want to take a blind leap, you can, but you must realize faith is to accept without evidence. When people come out of university, this is the foundation of Western education. John Dewey, the father of education, and after World War II, it began coming into the American universities. Now, when this way of thinking went throughout Europe, starting in 1850, all universities embraced it. Christianity was devastated. Today, most of the cathedrals are empty. Today, it was wiped clean. Most of the old cathedrals have, you can have, it's not uncommon to have 20 people sitting in a huge cathedral in Europe now. Christianity was white from the Middle Ages. Over 90% of people were in church every Sunday throughout Europe. Something changed when then the masses of Europe, especially England, France, all the way over Germany, that region began to accept there's no evidence for God. It was a huge disillusionment, and people began to say, nobody knows which religion is right because we can't even access God. Now, I want you now to jump back up here, okay? You're jumping up here, and I would like you to see the definition from the Bible perspective of faith. Here I'm going to draw an individual, my stick figure. I'm not an artist, okay? I'm comparing the definition of faith. Down here, faith is to accept something without evidence. Up here, that's not the biblical definition of faith. For example, how does faith come? Hearing. In Romans chapter 10, you have to hear something before you can even have faith. Romans 10 also says faith is of the heart. Okay? Down here, the idea that is in Western civilization is that the intellect is the control center of your being. Therefore, when they talk about faith, they're thinking to accept an idea without evidence is to give mental assent. To use your intellect and embrace some idea, that's what faith is. To embrace an idea about God with no evidence, that's what faith is. But if you're reading Scripture, no, faith is of the heart. For the heart man believes. But how do you get faith? By hearing. Coming into the ears. Those are ears. Okay? And then it says, faith comes by hearing what? Hearing the words of Christ. And that includes both hearing what Jesus said and also hearing about Jesus. Hearing, then your intellect has to analyze the information because you will not accept it unless it's a credible source of information. There is a processing going on. Faith is a change in heart that happens after you have heard, evaluated the evidence, and now brought your heart into agreement with what you have evaluated. God never asked anybody in the Bible to believe without evidence. For example, when Jesus would say to the multitudes, you believe because you've seen the miracles. Okay? Why? Because you saw. Faith can come by hearing or seeing. Jesus said you've seen. It can come also, not just by hearing, but by reading. The end of the Gospel of John, John says, and Jesus did so many miracles, had we written about all of them, there would be not a room in the world for all the books. But these ones we've written in order that you may believe. You can read about miracles, you can hear about miracles, or you can see miracles, and those will give you faith. Those will lead. You have to get evidence before you are just going to believe something. In fact, this is God's consistent way of working. In Acts chapter 17, when Paul talks to these philosophers right back here, still some Greek philosophers, he explains that God has provided proof for every human being by raising Jesus from the dead. God provided proof. God doesn't expect you to believe without evidence or without proof. You receive the evidence, then you've got to evaluate whether it's credible, then you agree in your heart. Now, some people may get all the evidence and still not have a change of heart. Like, you can have faith in something else. Like, you might have faith in the guy who runs a hardware store downtown. Yeah, I just like this guy. I believe he's a good store owner. Okay? But now, if he starts selling a bad product, you start realizing, man, start to have junk in here, you might lose faith in him. Okay? Because why? You had evidence, but now when you had evidence, you trusted. Trusted is of the heart. It's the change. But you could have gathered evidence about him for years and still never trusted him. Trust, belief, is something beyond understanding. It is when it is dropped in your heart, and now you come into agreement with it, and now you're on course. For the Western world, being taught in our educational system, they are taught that there is no such thing as evidence for faith. In fact, the definition of faith is to believe without evidence. The very definition is ridiculed in our secular universities. First they redefine it, then they ridicule it, saying those people are idiots, they believe without any evidence. Up here, as Christians, we don't believe without evidence. We are believing with evidence. In fact, there was a huge survey done across America asking people who believe in God, why do you believe in God? Top 4 reasons: design in creation, perfection in creation, beauty in creation, and purpose in creation. And number 5, personal experience of God in daily life. Christians, believers in God, give 5 reasons for why they believe in God. Those are 5 evidences. I have evidence. This is why I believe in God. But even more, I've got creation. I do not believe what Western education did and said creation is no proof of God. Are you kidding? Look out there. Somebody's responsible. Whoa. I mean, it would take years of brainwashing at a university to come out the other end, look at the world and say there was no creator. I mean, you can't come to that conclusion by yourself. It would take years of brainwashing to come out to a conclusion that there is no God. All you have to do is look at creation and say there had to be a creator. Duh. Okay? I mean, duh makes the point. But with Western education, in this transition, now it is the university system in our country, and I believe it's the greatest attack on Christianity that's happening in our country right now. It's not Muslims, it's not pornography, it's not drugs. As far as Christianity is concerned, it is the brainwashing of our young people, gradually separating God from the natural world, separating humans from God, and then cutting that separation and convincing people there is no evidence in the natural world that God exists, and then defining faith as the acceptance of things without evidence. See, we are accumulating evidence. Not only do we say this is the only thing that makes sense to explain this world, the existence of God, but we're also standing and saying creation exists, but Jesus was raised from the dead. God has provided proof to all of humanity by raising a historic fact. As something happened in space and time where God entered into history, proved himself to declare to the whole world, you don't have to doubt, you don't have to question, this is my proof. Now, sometimes those who try to undermine our faith will try to talk us out of believing the Bible. And in fact, in universities, you're often given a sheet of paper naming 100 contradictions in the Bible. Now, I've looked at several from several different universities, but somehow they take pleasure in handing out a piece of paper with 100 contradictions in the Bible. There are books written by Bible believers who've gone through every one of those and explained how none of them are contradictions. They're simply people who misunderstand the Bible because they don't understand the culture or the language. So I personally have gone through more than one list from different universities trying to look at everyone. I have more doubts in the atheists than I do in the scriptures, okay? And then they will talk as if, well, there's only one book that talks about Jesus, the Bible. Well, wait a minute. The New Testament has 27 different writings. It wasn't one book. There's 27. 4 of them are the entire life of Jesus. They were written as separate books, 4 separate books. All the letters are talking about the implications of Jesus' life. We don't have one book. We've got 27 writings from the first century included in the library called the Bible. It's a library of books. Plus, we have extra biblical books that are written that mention Jesus Christ, written during the first century. Plus, when Christians say no, I base it on my personal experience. They listed 5 reasons why I believe in God. The last one believing daily personal experience with God. I come back and I relate this as a real evidence. I was in a meeting, there was about 100 people there, and I wasn't speaking, it was a friend who was speaking, and he says, okay, I would like everybody in the room to listen to what I'm going to state, and if this is true for you, I want you to stand up. And he started naming about, I think it was 10 things on this. He says, I want everybody in the room who was an alcoholic before you received Jesus, but since you become free, you became a Christian, you've been set free of alcoholism. About 10% of the church stood. Then he said, it wasn't a church, it was a stadium. And then he said, okay, I want everybody in the room who was a drug abuser before, and then now you're free, stand up. I want everybody who had a marriage failure, your marriage is a mess, before you became a Christian, but now, since you become a Christian, you have been restored back into marriage. Another group stand up. Then he talked about all those with mental insanities, fears, and anxieties before they became a Christian to stand up. He went through a list of 10. Everybody in the room was standing up, testifying that I was this, now I'm this. That's, to me, proof that God exists and is active in the world. So since I watched him do that, I've done it in all kinds of places around the world where I'm in a group, and you know what? It's true all over the world. If you're in a place where there's Christians, most of the majority of people will testify, I was this, now I'm this, and the transition was a relationship with Jesus Christ. I see proof with my eyes. I believe it is absurd to even think that there is no God. And yet when we funnel our people through another way of thinking, we're losing a generation that we've got to prepare for this attack. Because this is the attack that's destroying Christianity. It wreaked havoc throughout Europe and destroyed the work of God, and it's only now beginning to be restored. The 7 largest churches in Europe today are all pastored by Nigerians. Okay? Nigerians are the very core of seeing a spiritual world and natural world are together. So, because I want you to feel this, I want to close by preaching like a Nigerian to you. Okay? Now, I cannot... European, yes. If you're in a proper European church, okay, God is way up here. You are way down here. In a proper church, oh God in heaven, we worship you today. Okay, this is kind of talking about a God who is distant. Talking in a cathedral, oh God, we love you and give you our praise today. Would you all stand, okay? And it's like that. But now the 7 largest churches in Europe are now, I mean, all of them are 20,000 people, and the hope for Europe are these Africans coming back who now do not separate the spiritual and natural. So now as I preach like a Nigerian, I want you to feel that I'm preaching from the perspective that the spiritual world is right here. Okay? I'm preaching because I believe it's right here. You must believe in the Son of the God. He's here, He's now, and He will touch you this day. This is the God I'm here to declare to you. This is the God who loves your children, who loves you, and will take you into His arms. This is the God we're here to tell you will love you. When a Nigerian talks, they talk of it here because they believe He's here. In the very language, if I talk like a Nigerian in most American churches, they can't handle it. They think it's too irreverent. It's too offensive. It's too close. Because God is here. But now I know you guys are a weird church. But there's something at work to separate us from God. The churches throughout Europe separated people from God by the tone in their voice. They believed in their heart what the philosophy was being taught, then theology taught, then they preached it from the pulpit, and the church left. The same thing is coming to America, and we've got to resist it. God is here. He's close. He's closer than your skin. He's right here. And if you read the Bible through that lens, it changes everything. Your daily life becomes Christianity is alive, and God is with you. Don't lose that. Everybody say amen. Amen.